And welcome to Country Telegraph. Nice to have your company on this. Hello, where am I? On this Wednesday. It's all happening. I jump into the chair just before we're about to start, but such is life, and it's got to be done. We have plenty of things happening around the country at the moment. Shortly, we'll be talking to David Davis from the opposition in Victoria, and with a bit of luck, fingers crossed, that will change, I think, around about November, because Victoria does need a change. What's making news around the country? Well, a forecast of major production cuts in Australia and the US has prompted the wheat market to react instantly overnight, with US wheat futures jumping about $25 a tonne. Australia's $50 billion wine industry says the budget's axing of a vital cellar door grant puts regional tourism and jobs at risk, with soaring petrol prices already reducing the number of visitors. The future of Victoria's revamped animal welfare laws remains in limbo, with it unclear if any money has been budgeted for them post-November state election. And certainly hope they do something about that. And some good news, two iconic outback Queensland towns, Longreach and Winton, have been named in Australia's Travellers 100 Best Towns to Travel To. That's Australian Travellers 100 Best Towns to Travel To. Now, to keep up to date with what's happening around the country, I suggest you subscribe to us, the Country Telegraph, on YouTube and Rumble, or follow us on Facebook and X. And we're streaming live on Facebook and X at the moment. Media reports note that the Victorian government-owned transmission company, VicGrid, will collect, wait for it, $119 million in charges on every household's and businesses' electricity bills in 2026-2027. That's up 30% on this financial year. A VicGrid spokesman said the increase in charges from $91 million this year to $119 million in 2026-2027 reflects additional work developing the scoping of Victorian transmission plant projects, establishing a new regime for projects seeking access to the shared network, and a significant increase in community engagement and consultation. Really? If we are looking at consultation with Victorian farmers, it's not money well spent. Can I come onto your land? No. Would you like to meet my 12 gauge? No, thank you. I'll go home again. Our guest today is David Davis, a member of the Victorian Legislative Council for the Southern Metropolitan region. David is the Shadow Minister for Energy and Emissions Reductions, Shadow Minister for Resources, and the Shadow Minister for Arts and Creative Industries. David was first elected to the Victorian Parliament in 1996. Just seems like yesterday. From 2010 to 2014, David served as the Minister for Health and Minister for Ageing. David, thanks for joining us.
Mike, it's a pleasure and good to talk to your audience.
You haven't aged. What happened to you? Do you have a mud bath every day?
I feel old, put it that way.
No, the lighting is magnificent. I must get some tips from you later on.
Oh, it's just in the parliamentary office. The Victorian Upper House is sitting today, so it trundles on. And if there's bells and red lights, you will understand that I have to abscond.
Oh, we love the sound effects. Keep it coming. Tell us about the how do Victorians cope with it? I mean, the federal budget's just come out. It's a real doozy. We see that the Victorian government is spending just willy-nilly on things that are not needed, things that are just a part of their ideology. How do Victorians cope? Because an increase in power bills is just horrendous for many, many families.
Well, the state is in a terrible position. We've seen the budget come down, and the headline of the budget, of course, is that debt will hit $199.3 billion for the general government sector. That's not even the wider budget. It's about another 100 billion for that by the end of the decade, and that'll be the biggest debt the state has had by far. It's a massive impact, and taxes are the highest of any state in Victoria. They've ramped up more taxes. It is really affecting the ability of business to make decisions and investment, and it's affecting the quality of life for families. You know, all those taxes actually do get sheeted home in the end, and that's what's virtually happening with VicGrid and a lot of the low emission technology that's occurring at the moment. A lot of the costs of that is being sheeted home to Victorian consumers, and VicGrid, as you've alluded to, is a body that's it's got a regulatory role in Victoria, a bureaucratic role, but it's taking more money out of the pockets of Victorian energy users. The costs of VicGrid are being sheeted home onto the bills for Victorian households and businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it's consumer pays for everything. They're paid for the upgrade of the poles and the wires too, transmission lines. They are an abomination if you're on the land, and the lack of respect that the Allen government shows the farmers, who, by the way, without them, you ain't got Australia, is just appalling.
Well, I was going to say VicGrid has taken a whole set of new powers, or been given a whole set of new powers. They've got these powers of entry, they've got the higher penalties, and they've been given recently the ability to undertake compulsory acquisitions ahead of environmental effects statements. So we say these are very bad things. We've indicated that we will reverse these changes that the government has made. We think the new penalties are extreme. We think the ability to compulsorily acquire before an EES is even... governments have always had big powers here, but this is what I kind of call the double bazooka approach. You know, you've got very significant powers as a government, and then you go in for this significant overreach, in my view, to take more powers and have more ability to go and ride roughshod over farmers and communities.
Could you just tell me the difference between, because I have to say I wasn't all that impressed with Jess Wilson, but however, she has morphed into something a little better, which needed to be, and she was inexperienced, young, blah blah blah. But she seems to be doing and saying the right things at the moment. Can you tell me what will happen with the transmission lines if you guys get in? Which I would at this time I would think you best chance you've had for such a long time. If you do get in, what do you do about the transmission lines? Because they are based on they're based on yes, aren't they?
Well, here we go. The first thing I'd say is that Jess is doing a very good job. She's actually a good leader. She's a good listener. And I must say I'm enjoying working with her. And she's, I think, been well received in the Victorian community. But beyond that, we made some announcements last week, and we said, look, if we're elected in November, we will pause and review all of these long distance wires. They've not had the proper assessments. They've not had the detailed cost benefit analysis that's required on all of these. And we think the costs of these wires are going to be sheeted home to Victorian households and businesses again. The work done by the Australian Policy Institute lays out, they think, more than $600 for every household, additional costs sheeted home to them by the 2030s. So, that's a huge annual cost year after year after year. It's like any major project. You want proper assessment, you want proper cost benefit analysis, and if things don't stack up, you don't do them. We also made an announcement last week that we said we would support the creation of urban solar parks. So when you drive into the major cities, and Melbourne in this case in particular, You drive around the ring roads, you'll see miles of big open land with massive distribution centres and large sheds of various types. Well, all of this land is, in my view and our view, very available for the creation of solar generation teamed with batteries and right near the city where the power need is. So we think this makes a lot of sense. It hopefully reduces the amount of need for generation elsewhere, but at the same time it makes cost sense. You don't have the costs of the long distance wires to get the power to the place where it's needed. And finally, we've been very clear that those additional new powers taken by the government, VicGrid in particular, to enter properties, to penalise farmers, new penalties, they will be removed. We will get rid of those. We think they are overreach. We think they're unnecessary, but we think they're significant overreach. And the idea went through the Parliament just a few weeks ago that you can start compulsory acquisition on some of these long distance assets before the environmental effects statement's finished. We think this is putting the cart before the horse. If if it turns out that the environmental effects statement says don't proceed, you've already commenced the compulsory acquisition. So we've said that this is also a bridge too far.
Yeah, because we are a regional, rural and outback program, our audience is very concerned about the intrusion from quasi sort of almost like the
Officials.
Yeah, and I understand they have a job too, so we're not got to be careful because they're individuals just doing what they're told to do. However, the Allen government has got no problems. These people is just bulldozing their way through people's livelihoods and well-being, and communities will suffer. So, can I ask you?
We're very opposed to this, and we can't see. Look, governments have always had significant powers, as they should. If you need to build a new road here or a level crossing there, or you can do the list as well as I can. Governments do need certain powers, but they've always had these powers. Now, what is it that suddenly says we need to double the penalties, that we need extra powers to enter land? What is this that's going on here? It's an authoritarian sort of streak. There's an inability, it seems, to actually engage and talk to communities. And then this recent one where they said, we're going to give the power to start the compulsory acquisition on a project before the environmental effects statement is done. Well, I think it's got whiskers on it.
It's got more than that, but we'll be polite here, I think, David.
I'm trying to be polite.
That's good. Just imagine at 5 o'clock, a couple of tipples of some nice red wine that might change. Tell me about VicGrid. Is it a government-owned entity? Or
Yes.
So it is. It's not a quasi.
No. It's a fair. Well, it's a separate office. It's a separate entity, but it's part of the bureaucracy, and it's discharging the government's plan. It's done the transmission plan, which we've also said will be fully reviewed, and the RESs, the energy zones, the regional energy zones. We've said they'll be reviewed as well. VicGrid has had all its hand on all of these. It's a government agency. Unusually, it's funded from the power bills in that way, and that's what we've seen, a surge in the amount they're going to take. They've increased the number of staff they've got. They've increased the number of executives that they've got. And they are a regulatory body in that sense, but they're also discharging a lot of the activities.
I need to ask you, because we're talking about electricity here, the data centres that they're building all over the place, they require two things that we don't have a whole lot of at the moment in Victoria. That's electricity, and the other thing is water. And then where they're located because they need access to those facilities, they're smack bang in the middle of residential areas. And I understand the world is moving to these data centres, but these are monstrosities. They're not there to do any good. The only good they're going to do is in the back pocket
Their
of.
shareholders. Yeah, look. We see that there's obviously a role for data centers, and we all are using electronic communications on which these play a significant role. But there does need to be a proper plan. We're told the state government actually has a plan, but they won't release it.
No,
People have asked for it, and there was actually a motion in the upper house today, a so-called documents motion, which is a short motion which orders the government to hand it over. So they've got 30 days to hand over this document that they've got, which lays out their plan for data centres. But you're quite right. I mean, what on earth is going on where there's not a well understood plan across the state about how we manage this? How do we manage the huge energy demand? How do we manage the water? Do you relocate some of these near recycled water? That's one thought that's there. What are the rules?
It needs cleaner than clean water, and can never be reused again. It's poisonous.
Well, this is all the sorts of questions that have got to be asked, and all the questions that have got to be looked at. And all of these data centres, I'm well informed, have diesel backup power, and they're all looking for additional reliable power that they're going to be able to utilise into the future. And at the same time, we've got huge needs of power growing across the state as well. So, we've said gas is going to be one of the important things in Victoria. We see that more gas has got to be brought on at the same time to provide some of the baseload power and targeted peaking power that will be needed.
The other thing with the data centers, I mean, they are monstrosities, and I understand that we do need it to move forward. There's a price of progress, but having said that, they probably need to be put in areas that are not near residential. In the US, for example, they have to provide their own power, and what they're doing is they're going small nuke power stations. We probably need to readjust our way of thinking when it comes to alternative power sources, such as nuclear power, because that's a way that data centers can at least exist when it comes to the electricity required. However, the water is the next thing. You can't reuse the water. It's poisonous. It's very bad for everybody. So you can't reuse that. You can't pump it back into the ocean. So what happens then? So these are the things that, and I understand governments have been encouraged with investment in their particular community. The investment is not in the case of employment, because they don't need anybody.
Well, they have a bit of employment while they're being built,
That's it, and
then they have a sort of skeleton staff beyond that. So they're not a big employer as such. And the government here in Victoria is handing out permits very freely. There's one down in Fisherman's Bend that they handed out. It seems in about 70 days recently. So the permit was put in and ticked in full. Electricity, gas, sort of the water, the whole thing in Fisherman's Bend in about 70 days. So it's very short, and the community input to that didn't appear to be anything at all.
Well, the areas of the US where these data centers have gone up, and I think they're like 10 or 20 football fields long. That just destroyed the local communities and the towns. And also the next thing is, who pays for this? Is it the taxpayer? Because we would like a little more than having grok working overtime. And we need people employed. We need to make sure it doesn't hurt the communities. We need to make sure the benefits that far outweigh the disadvantages.
I agree with all of that, and it's a ramshackle approach that we have at the moment. We need a thoughtful, proper approach. I noticed the New South Wales government has released a paper seeking community input and discussion on a lot of these matters. So they're at least going out to try and create some more thoughtful process. In Victoria, we have some sort of plan, but no one can see the plan. So it's a strange secret plan.
Mm.
The upper houses today ordered that it be provided within 30 days.
Can you tell me how come the Victorian government is getting away with what it is? And this is not a bash Jacinta Allen on the head time, but I might as well make the most of it since you're here. Because they have, if you look at from things, the CFMEU, you look at the abomination of the works they're doing throughout Melbourne and Victoria, you look at the farmers, the transmission lines, you look at the data centres. How come they're getting away with it?
So the enormous waste is to the fore. So what we learned about from the Queensland Royal Commission, what we learned is that the CFMEU and the big build sites, and people in Victoria be familiar with the big build, the Metro, the Westgate Tunnel, all of those. 15 billion, maybe as much as 30 billion, has been squandered in corrupt payments. This is not overruns. This is corrupt payments. So that is an extraordinary amount of money in pure and frank corruption. This is payments to bikie gangs, payments to the CFMEU, payments for strippers on work sites. This is just a mind-numbing amount of money. And the waste goes beyond even that corruption. You look at a site, or you look at a project like the Northeast Link, that started at about 9 billion, but it's near $27 billion now, $27,000 million. So these are gigantic amounts of money, and you've got to ask yourself, how has it been allowed to go like that? Well, one of the things is the state government has these kind of cost plus contracts, these alliance contracts, which are got not proper cost control on them. So the costs just meter out and meter out and meter out, because the taxpayers ultimately paying, but it's being borrowed and added to our debt. That's the truth of the matter. So, we need infrastructure projects, there's no question of that, and some of them are projects that we strongly supported. We supported the Northeast Link. We know that the trucks and that going north in Melbourne need to be able to get out to the ring road, and that makes entire sense. But $27,000 million, it's so much money.
It is.
It's so much money, and we're in a terrible position now because the government has generated all these costs. So the consequence of that is our debt has gone up so much. They've lost control of a lot of this. The Treasurer, I think, is out of her depth. The Premier, I think, is actually out of her depth too. She can't seem to understand that you've got to control these huge costs and work through all of that. So if we come into government in November, as we hope we do, Jess has laid out a plan. There's a 10-point plan that's been put out, and that's an important set of steps to actually get us to government.
Tell me,
When we're there.
Without being, waving the flag too much, I mean, I go back to the Jeff Kennett days, and I thought Jeff Kennett, and I thought the Victorian government was magnificent. I thought it was a bad result, and it was like a protest.
I remember it very well.
It was terrible, and it was, and I think ever since then, and even though we've had other iterations of the Liberal Party in there, I think we
were 4 years between 2010 and 2014. We stabilised the debt,
and then
we did quite a bit of work. I mean, I can tell you, I was health minister. Hospitals like Bendigo have got my signature on them. The VCCC, the Cancer Centre, we did a lot of good work, but were beaten by the politics, I think.
How has politics changed? Because, let's rephrase that. How has government changed? Because I mentioned Jeff Kennett. In those days, technology was just starting to move ahead. we discovered electricity and running water and that sort of stuff, but it was just moving ahead. Now the whole
That's
world
the
is,
sort of thing my children say to me.
look, just slap them down. It's terrible. You tell them, I've said you look so young.
Yeah, no,
But
they say
it has
things like that.
changed, hasn't it? I mean, what was a priority, say, before year 2000, and what priorities are now? They are different. But with that comes these problems that, I mean, look at climate change. First of all, I don't believe that, and neither do the oligarchs, such as you talk about Bill Gates and these. Oh, climate change. All of a sudden, climate change is, oh, it's not going to happen. Two reasons. One, they're building these great big data centers which go against the whole thing they've been saying. And secondly, Grok and all those are saying that what you're saying, or what people are saying who believe in climate change is wrong. So all of a sudden their messenger is telling them an entirely different thing. So if we have these data centers and stuff that can provide factual information and tell us as it really is, because that's all they are doing at the moment. They haven't yet been tampered properly by humans. If it's saying that climate change and stuff is really not real, it's a nice way of funding individuals, but that's about it, and putting the states and the federal government in enormous debt and destroying the environment to save it. If you have that information on hand, what will you do about it? What will your government do about it? Because at the moment, Victoria is up to its neck in debt because of corruption and stuff, but also because of the woke ideology that's in place. And you could move across to the federal government too. They're the same thing. These data centres, with increased intelligence with Grok and all those, are saying that it's all BS. So how will you change it? If that's there saying what we've been taught in school is wrong, and science says it is wrong, how will you change it? Will you change it, or do we keep going
Well,
along the path?
there's a few things I'd say. The Victorian Auditor General wrote a very good report in early December last year. He released, and he looked at the transition, the energy transition, and the risks behind it. And he said there was a very significant risk to Victoria of it going astray. He took some material from the state's risk register, which is not a public document, and said there's a very significant risk. So he's pointing to thoughtful risks that are there for the state. And then he pointed to some of the targets, and he said, look, there's targets, for example, offshore wind, and he said these are not going to be met. He said they're not going to be met. It's very clear that they've slipped. They're not going to be met. And a lot of that's true, but we come back to, at some point, to managing bigger projects, keeping these bigger projects on track and on budget, and not squandering large amounts of taxpayers' money. So it doesn't matter what else you're doing around the countryside. If your North East Link project, the one I used before, is going from 9 to 27 billion, you've got big problems. So you've got to find a way to properly scope these big projects, to keep the big projects under control so that the costs don't blow out completely. And then you've got to take the steps that are necessary to get the state under control and the spending on a number of these wasteful things under control. We've said there'll be a royal commission into the waste and the corrupt spending on these sites. Now, we just have to stop that kind of spending. So there's a lot of, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of very obvious things that need to be done, but haven't been done, and a new government would do them. They would stop a lot of this waste, and that's what we intend to do.
And I think we also need to revisit it. I mean, the education system has failed when it says that climate change is real. I mean, if you look at one of the latest reports, I can't think of the organisation, but the Earth has never been greener. And they say, welcome the warmth, fear the cold. That's the basis of it. We are not going through a climate crisis by any stretch. And if you look at history, go back a few 400 years, maybe 500, you'll see that it's quite regular to have a mini ice age, but not cold enough to freeze everything, but it's pretty bloody cold. And when that happens, nothing grows. So at the moment, we're either just coming out of it, no, we're just going into it. So we've got problems. You don't want to stop the earth from warming up, because otherwise you and I we will be very, very cold along with everybody else. And nothing grows, nothing happens. The rural area then is just decimated. Can I just ask you one more thing? When you get into government, what's the first thing you guys will do besides faint when you see all the terrible things that have happened that have been hidden from you?
I always tell the story of when I was first health minister. I came from government, and this is a kind of it's an old war story in one sense, but it's an amusing story in another. I came from Government House after being sworn in and met with the secretary, Fran Thorne, who's a very competent person. And I said, I've got a list of things here. I handed over a starting list, and this is round one. She said, well, there's three things, and she went through three things, and there was some machinery type things and so forth. And then she said, well, there's one very urgent problem. And she said, look, it's the 2nd of December, and Christmas Day is looming. And this year, because of the exact pattern on Christmas Day, there's another holiday. But the government hasn't accounted for the holiday in its funding. So the nurses and the doctors and everyone in the hospitals will, as things stand, not be able to be paid. And I said, well, how much is that? She said, $55.2 million. And she said, you've got three choices. You'll either go to the Parliament and get the rules and laws changed in your first week back. That didn't actually appeal to me too much. Or you'll get the Treasurer to pay the money to health so that we can then reimburse all the hospitals and health services. Or you force the hospitals to cut their budget somewhere else for the equivalent amount. I mean, I'm a coward, and I rang the Treasurer, the newly sworn in Treasurer, with an early piece of news. So, I mean, you're right. You come into government and there are completely unforeseen things. The state government had forgotten that Christmas is around the 25th of December, and had been around that time for about 2,000 years, but they'd left the holidays and the funding for the holidays out of the budget. So it's in one sense it's just a tiny example, but look, I think when we come to budget to government, there will be a whole set of significant challenges. I don't doubt that. I don't think this is an honest government. I don't think it's a government that is scrupulous in actually making things transparent. I don't think that's their nature at all, and I think that there will be things that we have not thought about. In the case of my portfolio, we've announced that we're going to review a number of these key projects, and that will be a very early thing that I will be focused on, making sure that gets moving and is done honestly and with integrity and with competence. So, and that we want to see the costs and benefits of these things.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Are they going to hide the key to the liquor cabinet from everybody for a while?
I don't know. I don't know about that. I think it'll be a very difficult and challenging time. I don't doubt any of that.
Yeah, I think we'll wait and see, because you've had too long in the wilderness. We need to actually bring back some just reality and some honesty to Victoria. And I'm showing my true colours. Look, David, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for your time. If somebody wants to find out more about what they can look forward to with the new government? Where can they go for that?
The Liberal Party website has actually got the lots of the material. Some of it's on our website. We're not always perfect in getting everything out there, but more and more we, as you allude to, we've got new methods of communication. We try and get things out on Facebook and on the LinkedIn and on the Instagram as well, so that people can see some of the points. I stood and talked about the new 10-point plan today, which hopefully will go out on Instagram and Facebook at some stage later today or tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. I always recall Jeff Kennett because I was a very strong Jeff Kennett fan, still am. And some things stick in your mind. And whenever he had that call when he was on 3AW with, I think it was Neil Mitchell, and people would call up and razz him a bit, he'd always be polite and say, "Go forth and multiply." And I thought that was fantastic. And he is, and still is.
He's a great statesman. I have a lot of regard for Geoffrey Gibb Kennett. He did a lot to put Victoria back in a strong position. The sad thing is that Labor has now been in power, by the election day, it'll be 25 years minus 4. So it's a huge sweep of time. And or 27 years almost, I think. Yeah, it's a very long time, and they're tired. And if I can be, direct here, I think corrupt to the core. I don't mean that about every person, but the actual way the government operates and the waste, the money that's been squandered on those building sites is just. I don't recall this in my time in politics, the scale of the waste.
Absolutely awful. Look, David, it's been a pleasure. Must do this again. I would love to if you have time down the track.
Well, it's a huge pleasure, and I'd be happy to.
Thank you very much. David Davis there. This is the Country Telegraph.
Experience the ultimate day out at the Mildura Field Days happening on May 15th and 16th at the Mildura Racecourse. Discover a vast array of exhibits, from home gardening tools to the latest in large-scale farm machinery. Explore lifestyle, leisure, home products and services, and much more. Don't miss this opportunity to learn, explore and have fun. Enjoy free entertainment, hands-on pets, live music and delicious food. Mark your calendar and join us for an unforgettable experience at the Mildura Field Days.
And welcome back to the Country Telegraph. Bendigo Bank Agribusiness's business latest monthly commodity update says recent rains have given Aussie farmers a valuable head start on sowing this season's winter crop. But higher freight fuel, fertiliser cost, they're squeezing margins right across the country. Now, our guest is Eliza Redfern, Senior Manager, Industry Insights. Eliza, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for waiting. Sorry about that. I could see you then. I thought, do I
Oh,
hear snores coming out down the line? But no, you did
no,
it.
no, it was obviously a very good conversation. So no, all good. Happy to wait.
It's going to be interesting times in the rural sector throughout Victoria if the opposition now become government. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? The Bendigo Bank May Insights report is out. Which areas are doing the best and which ones aren't doing so well?
Oof, yeah, that's a good question. I think, look, ultimately, what we're seeing across the sectors is a bit of commonality in the sense of pressures around weather, sort of what that's looking like going forward. Obviously, there's a drier outlook forecast, so we're seeing that flow through into livestock pricing. We're seeing that flow through into higher grain prices, especially for barley. Up in Brisbane and Newcastle, those kinds of markets. So ultimately, there's that pressure, and then the impacts of the Middle East on input costs, which is impacting producers across all of the sectors.
With these rising costs, it's going to, it's going to also impact in the supermarkets and right across the country. Do you think that's, how long do you see, it all depends on, at this stage, the conflict in the Middle East, but if it was to keep going, do you think we'll ever come back to the days when it was cheaper, or is it always going to be more expensive because of the fertiliser cost and the fuel supply cost and just all those sort of things?
Well, I think, when we usually see periods of inflation when prices go up, they rarely sort of go back to where they were initially. But it probably depends on the category as well. I think the pricing mechanisms and the way in which some of those pressures flow through to consumers is different depending on the sector. So obviously within the horticulture space, there does tend to be, a little bit more of an easier relationship or a clearer relationship in the sense of if there's tighter supply, then you'll see that flow through onto the shelf. But whereas for something like dairy, and we talk about this in our May report, it's not as simple of a process. And whilst there might be manufacturing costs that have risen for the processors, we are expecting the price paid to farmers to stay relatively stable. So effectively, that paired with this cost-conscious behaviour of consumers, ultimately might limit how far some of those price increases go. So it is ultimately going to depend on what those fundamentals are and the category. But certainly are expecting some increases to flow through to consumers in the months ahead.
Can you tell me why farmland values are at record highs? I have no idea. What's the reason?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the last decade really has been key. There's obviously been a lot that's happened within that time frame. I think, comparing a lot of the seasons within that period, more of the fundamentals have been on the positive side compared to the less supportive or negative side. And then coming into 2020 or the 2020 years, we obviously had the pandemic and we saw where interest rates had come down to historical lows. Commodity prices were relatively supportive or positive across multiple sectors, and weather conditions in some of those years were supportive too. So combining a lot of those factors, it meant that there was tighter availability of farmland on the market, but it meant that demand was higher, and that borrowing capacity was also really supported during that period. So we've obviously come into 2025, with some of those fundamentals in place, but at the same time, the market is starting to cool. So as we know, interest rates have risen this year. From a commodity perspective, there's obviously a lot of caution and concerns around input costs as a result of the Middle Eastern conflict, and what impact that might have on yields and incomes in the months ahead or the rest of this year. So there is a lot more cautious activity. So whilst prices hit a new record in 2025, the growth rate was only 2.8%, which was actually the smallest growth rate in the last 12 years. So we are starting to see that cooling come through. So yes, at a record, but the market is starting to change.
What about a summary of the national picture and how that varies state by state?
Yeah, so as mentioned, record on a national level, but ultimately the story there is really a year of two halves. So we had drier conditions in large parts of the country, especially down in southern areas, which was impacting prices. And then in that second half of the year, we saw conditions improve. We saw, whilst we had a shallow easing cycle of interest rates or the cash rate, we saw that flow through in the second half of the year, and that sort of helped pick prices up. But the story really is on the regional level. And so, comparing the states, the median price of farmland did increase across all of them except for Victoria and Tasmania. So, for Victoria, the story was relatively the same in the sense of a story of two halves or a year of two halves, dry conditions in that first half really impacting large parts of the state, and then improved conditions in the second half. And for Tasmania, the median price of farmland fell 20%, which sounds like a lot, but it's more a reflection of a lower number of transactions, which is quite typical for the state, but it means that median land price can be really quite volatile.
Tell us about your climate report and what this covers and its conclusions.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a recent report from us. So we last had the report back in 2024, and so this is the most recent update of the report. Effectively, as we know, there are increasing pressures coming through the supply chain and back down to farmers from a sustainability and from a climate perspective, whether that's, from a more variable climate or changing weather conditions, or and more extreme weather events, or whether that's from the market side of things. So it might be changes in Europe or other key markets, where I guess though that market access piece is impacted as a result of sustainability and climate views and emissions, and also the consumer side in terms of what's their positioning on sustainability and climate. How does that drive their shopping behaviour? So there's obviously a lot within the topic, and ultimately there is a lot happening within the world at the moment. So the point of this report is to pull all of the information together, whatever available tools there are. This report covers it for producers. The idea being that when the dust settles on, all of the recent conflict, assuming that there's nothing else coming down the pipeline, that sustainability and that climate focus still is going to be there within agriculture. And so this report is to help farmers navigate that when the time comes.
Tell me, because you heard me having a conversation with David Davis about climate change, and now that with all these data centres happening, we have grok, enhanced grok, magnificent grok, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, they are now pumping out the facts as they are. And all these AIs are saying that climate change is truly bunkum, basically. Then we have all the oligarchs, those that are building these data centres, are also saying the same thing. Part of that is because they need to get around certain environmental concerns with the data centres, but it's moving down that path. So if we're looking at climate when it comes to altering people's attitudes and the way they operate and how they grow things or whatever, could we just say it's just the weather?
Well, look, I mean, it's obviously a very topical point, and it always has been, right, over time, depending on, sort of what research is out there, what technology is out there, and as you've mentioned, there's a lot happening within the space at the moment. So I think, there is a lot happening there. There is a lot available, but to your point, obviously people have different opinions on the matter. And so the point of this report is more just to pull that information together. And when and if producers, want to look into what options are available for them and how the weather might impact operations in their area or their industry, that's where they can look at this report to help get some of that info.
Yeah, it's interesting. We could talk all day. I won't, because I have to get to the next guest, and I talk too much. Apparently, I've been told by my producer, you talk too much. I apologise again. I kept you waiting. Eliza Redfern, if somebody wants to find out more about what we've been talking about, and they can read at their leisure and not get rushed by me, how do they do that?
Yeah, for sure. So just on the Bendigo Bank website on the Agriculture Insights page, so you can access all the reports that we talked about today.
Absolutely fantastic. Eliza Redfern, Senior Manager Industry Insights. This is the Country Telegraph. Now let's find out more about the weather.
Hello with your national weather forecast as we take a look at what we're expecting for tomorrow. That's for Thursday, the 14th of May. First, having a look at the synoptic map, and we can still see this very large and dominant high pressure system sitting over the southern Tasman Sea. It is gradually inching its way towards New Zealand, but still producing southeasterly winds and showers right along the eastern seaboard. And for southeastern parts of the country, it will be another mild and mostly sunny day. Further inland, we do have a surface trough, and that is deepening, bringing showers to central and south Australia through the day. And over in Western Australia, a number of surface troughs bringing cooler winds, as well as showers and isolated thunderstorms across southwestern parts of the state. However, to the south, we do see a cold front that will become important as we head into Friday. It will move towards the east and link up with the surface trough inland, bringing widespread showers to central and eastern Australia over the weekend. For northern Australia, though, very little change compared to the last few days, just a few showers brushing through, including across the top end. So now state by state look, starting off with Queensland. We are expecting showers for most of the state, and really the only dry district is expected to be the Maranoa and Warrego. Along the east coast, showers with a focus of heaviest falls around the Gold Coast and again across the Cairns area. Inland, showers and isolated thunderstorms, most likely across the Channel Country, but we could see some of those totals building eastwards out towards Longreach. But under cloud cover, temperatures reaching the mid to high 20s, remaining fairly cool in the southeast and windy in the north, with strong wind warnings for coastal waters north of about Cairns. For Brisbane, a partly cloudy day with showers moving through 24 degrees. Showers also up in Cairns with a top of 27. Now to New South Wales, we'll see patchy morning fog and low cloud in the east and out towards the ranges, and with winds coming off the Tasman Sea, we will continue to see isolated to scattered showers. So broadly expecting 5 to 15 millimetres on the south and central coast, including for Wollongong, Sydney and Newcastle. We could see those 24-hour rainfall totals exceeding 30 millimetres north of about Ballina, and we could see isolated thunderstorms up towards the Queensland border. A few showers will spill over into the western slopes, otherwise looking like a dry and mostly sunny day inland. For Sydney, cloudy with showers 22 degrees, partly cloudy in Canberra with a slight chance of a shower and a top of 19. For Victoria, it's very much a case of rinse and repeat with very little change compared to the last few days. Patchy morning fog in the south that will lift to a mostly sunny day, but we could see an isolated shower along the Murray and then again out towards the northwest of the state. With those east and northeasterly winds, temperatures again very much above average for this time of year. For Melbourne, patchy morning fog lifting to a mostly sunny day with a top of 21 degrees. Mildura partly cloudy but slight chance of a shower out towards the South Australian border with a top of 23 degrees. For Tasmania, we will see patchy morning fog, mostly through central and southern districts, and it will be cloudy in the north with some patchy showers up to 5 millimetres is possible. But we are expecting a sunny afternoon to follow across the south of the state. And with northeasterly winds again, temperatures rising up into the high teens for most areas. So for Hobart, mostly sunny at the top of 19 degrees. A couple of showers for Launceston and the north coast also rising between 17 and 19 degrees. To South Australia, we can expect to see cloud and showers moving down from the north, isolated at first, but tending scattered across the northeast of the state. The showers will push down towards the Eyre Peninsula, York Peninsula, and also the mid-north. We could also see a shower or two brushing over Adelaide during the day as well. Otherwise, with those winds coming through from the north, humidity levels will start to rise as well. For Adelaide, partly cloudy, slight chance of a shower through the day, 24 degrees, and temperatures pretty consistently around 24 to 25 degrees across northern parts of South Australia. To Western Australia now, we do have a surface trough across inland areas. Warm winds ahead of that will push temperatures right up. But behind that, we do have a cooler southwesterly change coming through that will bring isolated showers across the southwest of the state. We could see up to about 2 millimetres along the coast towards Geraldton, and for the wheat belt up to 2 millimetres south of about Merredin. But otherwise, we are expecting some higher falls about Albany coast and over towards Esperance. For Perth, we are expecting a partly cloudy and cooler day, chance of a shower in the morning afternoon with 20 degrees, and it will warm up into the high 20s to low 30s across the Gascoyne and Pilbara. Finally, for northern Australia, easterly winds will push showers onto the eastern and as well as the northern top end, and a few showers continuing across the Queensland border and down towards the interior and Alice Springs. But rainfall totals only expected to be up to about 2 millimetres or so. Otherwise, expecting a mostly dry day for the rest of the Northern Territory and out towards the Kimberley. For Darwin, mostly sunny with a top of 33 degrees. That's your forecast for today. Stay up to date with the latest information and warnings on our website and app. Follow us on social media, and as always, have a great day.
And that's about it. I'll catch you tomorrow. Same bale of hay, same phone box. Don't forget to be kind to your neighbours, be kind to yourself. And I keep thinking about A friend of ours said that a particular celebrity in the US used to say that, and then they said that she was eating people. So I always think when I say that of cannibals. Anyway, I need a scotch. Have a good one. See you tomorrow. Bye.